Hello, good evening. Sorry we're starting a bit late today. And also you'll see that it's you can only see Karis and myself here. But Mike is there, I think. Are you there, Mike? No, but Mike may appear sound only or possibly both sound and video because Mike's in London. Mike's away from the usual place where Mike sits, and so the internet connection isn't so good. And Shannon is not here, maybe won't be joining us, but it would be nice if she does. So at the moment, it's Karis and myself, and I will start off on that basis. So, hello, Karis. Sorry, I didn't say hello to you on here sooner. How's it going?
Hello, yeah, we're
Oh,
good.
Mike's trying to rejoin. Hang on. Mike assigned a placeholder. Mike. Whether or so, okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, all well with you?
So,
Oh,
my connection, guys, is terrible. But in 5 minutes, I might be better.
okay. We'll keep trying then, and hopefully we'll see you in a bit. So
Hey, right, guys, I'm here. My connection's so bad, I'm going to try and fix it.
you think you can fix it or you can't? Oh, well, never mind. So I will tell you.
I think get 5 minutes. I think I can.
All right then. So hopefully see you in 5 minutes. So shall I start? I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about today, and the first of these hopefully will be useful to people because it's to do with new people who can't find solicitors. And you should see here that, where's it gone? I've created a slide to show you what I've created. I'll just go back to the beginning. If you look at the link to this channel, and I think there should be a link. If there isn't one, I'll put it on the details of this show. But I'll try and distribute this. I'm going to sort of do some social media stuff. I'll do I don't use X, what used to be Twitter, but I'll put something on Blue Sky and LinkedIn, and you should see it on the YouTube channel. But I've created a page about finding a solicitor and getting help with housing law problems, and there's some blurb there which explains the nature of the situation. But more importantly, if you click on the link on there, you can get to the list of various solicitors and organisations who can help, which Mike and I have been mentioning on different shows. I think you had to go to my blog and then click a link to that, but now it's available here on Notion, on the Notion site, and what maybe even more use to people. And I mean, it's an experiment, and I don't know how well it'll work, but I've created a form which you can access. If you go back to the beginning of that page, and you'll see at the top here, there's a link to clicking on the form. And if you click on that, you should get to this form, which enables you to submit your details. It's mainly, as you see, it's contact details, then details of any special needs or disability that we should be aware of, and then you can put a summary of your case. And unlike this show and Mike's show, you can put it, please do put it in the first person because it's confidential and it's not going to be broadcast, and then we can get back to you using the contact details and see if we can take you on. It's going to be primarily at the moment through Virgo solicitors, but I also work for a firm called Morrison Spowett in Catford, and I should be able to take on work there as well. And we'll just have to see what the response to this is. It may be that nobody signs up for it, but the people that ask, how do we get help and how do we contact a solicitor, hopefully word will get about and they can have a look at this. So if anybody spots anything or has got any suggestions, please leave a comment. I'll just have have a look at some comments today. We've got some people putting comments in. So first comment's from Mo Hall. Hello, Mo. And it says, oh, you've got a question there. So should we just jump into the questions, Karis?
Yeah.
I've got another little slide thing which I'll come back to later if we've got time. So Mo's asking, if a council refused the one-bed local housing allowance case for a homeless domestic abuse survivor, what legal action, if any, can be taken? And Mo's put another question. Is there any West End solicitors? I don't see an option for West. Oh, hang on a second. Let me just go back to my list. And I go to, bear with me, I'm sort of mastering this navigation. So if we go back to page 2, I think it is. No, you're quite right. There isn't a West. I think maybe I've slipped there because I definitely have got some firms that are in West London. Maybe they got missed out when I was transferring it. Because there's Hammersmith, is it Hammersmith and Fulham Law Centre? That should be on there. I'll update this afterwards, sorry. And there's also Oliver Fisher in Fulham. And then there's another law centre, there's the Ealing Law Centre, who will be on there once I've finished with this. So yes, there are. I mean, if in the meantime you Google those, you should find any of those organisations, and they're all pretty good. So I hope that answers your second question. If we just go back to your first question, which is this one. If a council refuses to the one bedroom. So, Karis, any thoughts on that? I'll have to just get my brain in gear. So let me just check the one bedroom local housing allowance. Presumably that is to say one bedroom local housing allowance, meaning rent or
Is he asking for housing benefit? Sorry, I was
well, I
trying to find
think
my
so.
mute button.
I mean, Mo, if you could clarify what you mean by that, because the council would be paying housing benefit
That would be the
for
DWP.
temporary, wouldn't they?
as
And
well.
the DWP would be paying for non-temporary. And what's the one bedroom? Is there a cap on? Is that the one for young people where if you're is it under 30 or 35 that you can only
35.
get the equivalent of living in shared accommodation? And I think there's an exception to that for people who are victims of domestic abuse or survivors of domestic abuse. That's a better term. Is that what you mean, Mo? So come back to, so you're talking about universal credit. So that would be the DWP. And I suppose if the person, I mean, forgive me, I'm not a benefit specialist and I can look this up, but if the person is, if we're saying a domestic abuse survivor is entitled to housing benefit or housing allowance from the DWP covering a one bedroom property rather than a room in a shared house, then the legal mechanism for challenging that would either be a benefits appeal to the DWP, and failing that to a tribunal, isn't it? If that doesn't work. But I guess if there's some failure to carry out allow the appeal to go ahead, you could challenge it by way of judicial review. So yes, you could. I mean, essentially, I mean, I hope I'm not missing something there, but I mean, you could appeal it, and I'd encourage anyone to do so because an enormous, I mean, it's a very high proportion of DWP decisions get overturned on appeal. I've forgotten quite what the figure is, but I think it's more than 50%, isn't it? So I hope that helps. And I do come back and clarify if you didn't feel we've answered that. And hello to you.
They also have to ask for a review of the situation, a review of the refusal, if they've refused it.
If the DWP have refused it.
Yeah, well, they have to ask for a review.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, when I say an appeal, I mean you know, in the old days you used to ask for a reconsideration and then a review, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then you'd appeal to a tribunal if that went. But either way, you'd need to go for the DWP internal review first, and then go to a tribunal if that doesn't work. That's my understanding, but I haven't done much. Oh, hang on, we've got some more clarification. So Mo's saying if a homeless domestic, I think this is a variation. And Mo, be careful because you've started off the question in the third person, but you've slipped and gone to, well, I mean, unless you're advising this person and you're not talking about yourself, you talked about the first person in the last bit there. But I'll assume that you mean, can I assist the person in appealing the decision? So it says, if a homeless domestic abuse survivor with possible but undiagnosed autism and ADHD has been classed as non-priority, can they appeal? Well, I mean, I guess the problem is the undiagnosed bit, because if there's no diagnosis, then it would be difficult to challenge a decision to the effect that the person isn't entitled to the priority status that goes with a diagnosed condition. So I think it would be difficult to appeal is if they said, well, you haven't got a diagnosed condition, so we're not going to treat you as priority. But on the other hand, you could always go and try and speak to a doctor, get a doctor's report, or if it's just a problem of the person definitely has the condition, but it hasn't been diagnosed officially, maybe it's just a question of getting it diagnosed. I'm sorry if that's a bit vague as well. So I'm going to go back. I mean, come back if there's more on that one. So sorry, I was going to reply to say hello to you too, Cheeseface, and nice to have you with us. And we've got a question from, well, DC says, hi guys, but goes on to ask a question. What is the best way to ask for an OT assessment in regards to housing suitability? Now that's a good question. Because an OT is a very important OT. Sorry, for anyone not familiar, is occupational therapist, and an occupational therapist is well placed and respected in terms of making recommendations about what accommodation is or isn't suitable for someone. Yeah. So the key, and that they are quite. Whilst they're very much in demand, they're not. You can have to wait for quite a long time to get one. The question would be, how do you get an occupational therapist? I haven't actually been in a situation where I've actually had to approach one in a case where they're not involved or the council haven't already contacted them. Have you ever done that, Karis? And I can Google that while we're thinking. But do feel free to jump in if you want to answer it. How do I obtain a report from an occupational therapist? So I'm probably going to get something in California, but assuming it's English. So essentially it says you can contact an occupational therapy services through your local authority or being referred by a healthcare professional. So I would assume that means, I mean, obviously you could ask the council to get an occupational therapist, or you could ask your doctor. Well, I suppose the question then is, what if they don't do it? Which I guess you could make a complaint. And the other question is, how long would you have to wait? I think it's best to ask the GP if you say that you're having difficulties which might require an occupational therapist's input. The GP might make a referral, and they also have these other. I always get the name wrong. It's the social. What are they called, Karis?
Prescriber.
Social prescriber. Yeah. And I don't know how widespread. Have you heard how widespread social prescribers are hang on, I think Mike. Let's see if we've got a. If that is Mike. Oh, I've got two people. Hang on. I'll go to the Zoom overlay.
You're right, guys. I think I've got it sorted. Sorry about that.
Excellent. Hold on. Let's see if you're there.
adventure.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Zoom. So I'm going to, where are you there? Add mic. And I'm going to assign you as guest one. So Mike should appear there. I think it was just you logging on there, no Karis yet. Can you, I think you're muted and no camera at the moment, Mike. Oh, you're unmuted. Hello, hello. Are you there, Mike? Oh. Hang on. You just need to unmute yourself if you are there.
So I just there's a hiccup there. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's much better than before.
Yeah, cool video, but yeah, at least the audio's, at least I can hear you as well, which is good.
Can you see the eCam stuff so that you can see the questions and comments and stuff on the screen there?
Yeah, I can see what you can see.
So we were just answering the question about what's the best way to ask for an OT assessment, occupational therapist, and we just covered the possibility of a GP and or the social prescriber, who is a person usually attached to GP surgeries now that can deal with social issues, which a lot of doctors get, I was going to say fed up, but probably feel overwhelmed by the number of non-medical inquiries they have about writing letters for housing and so forth, or just helping people interact with the system out there in a non-medical way. And so they've got social prescribers who are more like a sort of social welfare advisor attached to surgery. So they may well be the person to speak to. I would say as well that this is something I always go on about, and forgive me, but I think it is important that if you're making a homelessness application, and then the duty of the council to assess your housing needs includes the need to assess the suitability of your housing, or put another way, what would be suitable accommodation for you, which is a slightly different question from deciding whether accommodation which the council have offered you is suitable for you. So you could ask the council as part of their housing needs assessment, and when they're drawing up your personalised housing plan, to include obtaining a report from an occupational therapist in that. And if they refuse to do that, you could then challenge the, I always get this the wrong way around, you could challenge the personal housing plan by way of a review. You could ask for a review of the contents, can't you? And then the housing needs assessment, you can challenge by way of judicial review if they fail or refuse to assess you adequately. I may have got that the wrong way around. The difference is that if you go for a review, I'm talking about a Section 202 review, which means you have to ask the council to carry out an internal review, and then you can go to the county court after that. So in this case, it would be the plan which you've drawn up, or the steps which you've proposed to take don't include getting an occupational therapist's report, which means you won't be able to consider my needs. So I hope that answers the question.
I wonder as well, Will, like basically, certainly for a unitary authority, although this is something which is never actually followed through with, but the law, where it appears that someone has care and support needs, then the local authority shall make an assessment under Section 9 of the Care Act. That would often include an OT, because in one sense, like, best way to get an OT assessment will often be the council OT that kind of actually helps you out. If it's kind of attached to social services. So in that sort of situation, getting Section 9 assessment would potentially lead to an OT report anyway.
Yeah, sorry, I should have.
Thank you.
I should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
So yes, the Care Act assessment. I mean, the problem in practice is that getting a Care Act assessment carried out is quite difficult. There's a lot of gatekeeping involved in that, and essentially a very short, underfunded adult social services in most local authorities. But yeah, I mean, if they refuse to carry out an assessment, you could challenge that by way of judicial review, or you could challenge the contents of it. but you'd be likely to need a lawyer for that because it's almost impossible to bring a judicial review without one. Anything else on that? Either of you? Let's see. The next question is, I think it's going to be this one, another one from DC. Does a short-term decant property need to be suitable for a disabled person? If not, what would be the best way to approach this? Mike, Gareth, do you want to have a shot?
I guess it depends who the decant has been done by. So often, I think we've discussed before, it's going to be potentially the landlord who's got responsibility for it if it's in the tenancy, but if not, it might be the local authority. If it's the local authority, it has to be suitable no matter what. But as you often point out, Will, the fact that the law says it has to be suitable doesn't mean it actually will be suitable in the real world. So I think when it comes to someone particularly where the disability is more obvious, I think a local authority is going to be pretty incompetent to not get that right. So I think just kind of raising it all throughout the contact with let's say it was the council arranging it, to kind of make sure the council's aware of what the disability is and what the needs are for that person, then it'd be pretty. I mean, yeah, it does happen quite regularly, but it would be pretty stupid for the council to get that wrong then, because it's just so obviously wrong.
When we're talking about a short-term decant, I assume here we're meaning when somebody needs to have works carried out at their home rather than temporary accommodation as a homeless person, because decant suggests that they're going back to the first place at the end of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think because I think we've discussed before, like, is the landlord responsible for housing the person whilst the works are carried out? And unless it says it in the tenancy agreement somewhere that that's the case, then I think potentially the landlord wouldn't have to step in and say that person might technically be homeless, because although they have accommodation, it's not accommodation which is reasonable to be there, to be occupying at that point. I think so. I think it just depends on what the arrangement is there. If it's a social landlord, then I would be more kind of optimistic that they would actually arrange something themselves. But again, yeah, same end result. You need to basically make absolutely sure that you've communicated multiple times what the disability is and what the needs are, what the accommodation needs to be like to actually maximise the chance of getting it.
But I think the bottom line there, as you say, is that if the person is not offered decant accommodation, or they're not offered suitable decant accommodation by the landlord, whether that is a local authority or a social, more likely to be a housing association, a private landlord is very unlikely, a sort of short-hold situation where the person may only have one property and they can't give you a decant. I suppose they could put you up at a hotel, but they're not likely to. Your last resort is to make a homelessness application. It slightly goes against the grain because a homelessness application is it's unwritten, but it's a sort of assumption that you're asking for assistance in the long term and not just temporary accommodation. But as I see it, there's no reason why you can't say, well, I am homeless at the moment, and the assistance I need is temporary accommodation until I'm not homeless. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, no, I've had it with clients with getting closure orders where they've got a 3-month closure order where in theory they'll be able to return it at the end of that period, although often in practice the landlord is then evicted by that point. But so you've got situations where they have a tenancy, but they can't occupy it because of the court order, because of the closure order, because they've been probably antisocial behaviour type stuff going on, but they are still homeless during that period. So in effect, the council have to house them and pay housing benefit in effect on, or the public purse is paying for both the rent and the temporary accommodation charges as well. So I think it can be used in that way.
Yeah, I'm just going to come back.
Same would go for a fire or flood or something where again, in a lot of cases the people will be able to return once the flood and fire damage has been dealt with.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the question about occupational therapists because Cheeseface has made some response suggestions which I'll put up. Number one is I'm assuming you're referring to occupational therapists there, Cheeseface. You can get private ones. Yep, that's true. The danger is they may charge a fee which you can't afford, which is why you'd need to get a referral through the NHS or the local authority. Then council ones take months and months. without a doc referral. Yeah, I mean, I agree. They can take a long time. Even with a doctor's referral, I would think they can take a while. And then Cheese Facer said, I had one myself, so can't comment on private ones, but I did find them on the net. So that is helpful. And look, we've got another one. Ginger G has said a friend keeps getting refused if requesting an OT assessment for housing priority to support application for medical points, but was informed adult social services said to request it for your needs. Yes. I think that's basically saying housing wouldn't get one, but social services might. And that goes back to Mike's point earlier. But they, in my opinion, they should both be doing it. Although I suppose there would be a legal point if housing, having made inquiries, was satisfied there was no need for an occupational therapist report. No disrespect to Ginger G's friend, but I mean, theoretically that's possible. But if there is an obvious need for an occupational therapist assessment, then it could be legally challenged, or you could make a complaint if you want to try and get a short-term solution about the decision not to get an occupational therapist. And yeah, the friend's waited 3 years since requesting it. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's much. I mean, that is much too long, and it may be that it's possible to challenge. I mean, whatever the consequences are of that, it may be that a legal challenge on suitability might be made, and the failure to get an occupational therapist might be part of that challenge. Do interrupt. Do jump in, guys, if you want to say anything. So I'm just jumping. I hope I'm not missing people, but we're back. Just to go back to that point about the show. Got a bit of visibility there for you, Mike.
Yeah, no, don't get excited. It's just, yes, camera's not working. I
All
just
right.
when my connection was going down before, there were questions around domestic abuse and local housing allowance, and basically been restricted for the shared room rate or shared accommodation rate. Basically there's a little bit of an unusual. Well, it's a little bit different from homeless applications in that if you're going to show that you're exempt from the shared accommodation rate and therefore qualify for the 1 bed rate, it specifies that you need a letter from a professional which basically confirms that you've been victim to a domestic abuse at some point during your life. And if I remember correctly, and I might be just kind of mixing these up a little bit, but I think it suggests things like a letter from the Marriott chair or the police or a social worker or something like that. As I say, there's in different areas of law, there's kind of different thresholds on kind of belief for domestic abuse. So in homelessness law, the default belief is to believe people who says they've been abused, whereas in other areas you need a bit more evidence. Same would go to the housing register. Often you need more evidence. So yeah, so that would be how you challenge it. Is you get a letter from a professional who can basically corroborate that you were being abused at some point, and it can be any point in your life. So it's kind of it could go back quite some way, but that should be enough. That's what the government website says about basically kind of meeting that criteria for that exemption.
So the steps to be taken to challenge the council's decision to only offer shared accommodation rate. I think we were saying earlier that would be if it's the council's decision, then you would challenge it by. I mean, that would be a housing benefit challenge, yeah, which you would do by a request for reconsideration and review, wouldn't you?
You might because it might cross over here. So as part of the relief duty in the personalised housing plan and so on, the council should be telling you what you're eligible for, and so they should be advising you said you are you've been subject to domestic abuse, therefore you would qualify for the exemption. This is how you go about proving it. So the housing officer should have given you enough advice to work out how to get through that, navigate that kind of that application process. So now, if that'd be how I challenge it. First of all, did they pick up on that fact? Did they kind of what was their advice about LHA and kind of eligibility for universal credit and stuff before you kind of actually look at challenging the council specifically or challenging UC specifically? Because potentially you could get the housing officers to do that work for you. and kind of contact UC for you, or kind of make inquiries of UC to kind of liaise with them or something.
Yeah, because it's a strange overlap, isn't it, between, because the housing department may, if they want to be difficult, say, well, it's not up to us to decide what housing allowance you get, or local housing allowance, so we can only offer you what you can afford. But as you quite rightly say, the effect of the duty to assess and draw up a personal housing plan means that they should be assisting the person in getting the right allowance so that they can get suitable accommodation, wouldn't you say? And maybe you just did say that, sorry.
So sorry, I'm just googling now. So basically, I can't share a link on the YouTube thing because it thinks it's spam. But if I just googled LHA rate domestic abuse exemption, and then you basically get onto the government site, and it's just basically saying that so evidence, the claimant must provide evidence from an official person. An official person is someone like a police officer, healthcare professional, registered social worker, or their employer. And then claiming the exemption, the claimant must inform their work coach at a job centre. There are no time limits for claiming exemption. So, as I say, like the housing officer, as part of the PHP, and just trying to be helpful in general, should kind of be certainly be waiting for that bit of work to happen. But yeah, it says, as it says here, contact the work coach to qualify for the exemption and take that information back to housing, and that would then show them that they actually are eligible for a 1-bed rate, if that makes sense. So that's quite a long way to explain it, but I'm hoping that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a question on there which does refer to the first person, so I'm not going to put it up. But the question is, will a letter from a GP suffice? Quite possibly it might, but it depends. I'm sorry if I sound trite, but it depends what the letter says. If it just says this person says they're a victim of domestic abuse, that's not going to work. But if it gives evidence that corroborates that, then it will. And same, so basically, as Mike says, it's any sort of public official that would say, and if they say something that indicates that they know that it's correct, then that should be sufficient. The other question was, how long can you expect the appeal process to take, which is tricky. I've forgotten what the statutory time limit is for a benefits appeal, although we're not necessarily, yeah, we are talking about that. Is it a number of weeks? Forgive me, I haven't done a benefits decision for a long time, but there is a time limit under which they're supposed to reach a decision, isn't there, on a review or reconsideration?
Yeah, I'm not convinced it's got that far yet. I think it's more a case of getting back, kind of getting back to basics, putting it in writing to the work coach, getting their decision, kind of if they're saying, in one sense, at that point, it's more of a discussion and a conversation rather than just making a flat out decision. So you can kind of go based on what they're saying, what evidence would they want, would the GP letter be sufficient and so on, and kind of have that conversation with the work coach rather than, I think, although, you can appeal it, either by going down the review process with the PHP or whatever, which is, I don't think it's a very fruitful way of doing it, or with the DWP. But I would have thought that if you've got a letter which, is good evidence, then they're not going to, as you say, well, like, the only situation where a letter is not going to do the job is if it doesn't actually prove or doesn't kind of confirm the abuse happened. So yeah, I mean, as you say, GPs may well have that sort of information on file because they treated you for anxiety when you're going through it or something like that. But it might be other professionals as well. So as I say, it does differ. Whereas within making a homeless application itself, you don't need to have a supporting letter from anyone. When you're applying for this exemption, you do. So yeah, if you haven't got that, then you're dealt with differently from when if you're dealing with a homeless application.
Right, so that's I think we've answered all the questions for the time being. So yeah, what I'm going to do is just jump to the other slide which I had, PDF, because I just thought people might be interested in this story, which concerns Hackney Council's housing computer system and the cyber attack they suffered in 2020, which, God, is 5 years ago now. I can remember this happening. I didn't know, because I deal with some cases involving Hackney, and the housing department was saying they couldn't respond to things, or basically respond generally to my inquiries and progress things because of this cyber attack. And I was trying to imagine what this would be and what form it took, because you sort of think of a sort of act of war, but I can't think why anybody would have wanted to do an attack on Hackney's housing computer system, unless they were just sort of trolling, people that just like causing damage, which I suppose is plenty out there online. But this story has been knocking around for a few years now, because having had the cyber attack, they then spent a very long time and a lot of money going for a new computer system. And there's also the fact that the Information Commissioner's Office investigated what had gone on and found that Hackney were at fault. I'm sorry if this isn't very easy to read. I will try and improve the visual stuff there, but this is the first, I think it's the first time I've put these slides and things on here. But what the Information Commissioner's Office pointed out was that Hackney had failed to take adequate security measures, and it included stuff like having profiles for people where the username and the password was the same, and then leaving those dormant when they weren't being used for a long time. Hackney weren't very pleased about that reprimand, and they put out an official response to the commissioner's comments, which are quite strongly worded here. I mean, the mayor, who makes the comment at the end, says, she is a sort of tactful understatement. Whilst we do not agree with all of the ICO's findings, etc., but higher up, an unnamed source is less bashful, and says, we believe, they say that they consider the ICO has misunderstood the facts, misapplied the law with respect to the issues in question, and mischaracterized and exaggerated the risk to residents' data. So that doesn't, bode very well to me that the council are taking such a hostile approach. I mean, I suppose one could say that the Information Commissioner could have got it all wrong, but they have investigated it, and it worries me that the council are taking such a sort of gung-ho approach to criticism. And one of the things that worried me as well, I can't quite see it on here, but there was the expression used, they were going to get a new computer system, and I think it's on this statement somewhere. I'm sorry I can't actually show it. Was that they were talking about getting a robust and transparent system and actually they've bought a new system, so we've got to see how that works. But what worried me about the term robust was that anybody following the post office inquiry will know that that was one of the magic words that Paula Venables and various people would say when asked questions about whether their Horizon system, which caused so much suffering and injustice, was actually defective. The response would always be that it was robust, which is being used again here without any sense of irony. And it also worries me that if a council spends 5 years reviewing its IT system and coming up with a new one at the cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds, nobody's heard anything about what this system is in terms of the public and how it affects them and what the council are looking to achieve. Because you think, well, what is a housing computer system? It's just essentially a database with communications facilities on it. It's not as if you're sort of landing a man on the moon or something, but it would have been nice to know what the council were thinking, and moving into the second half of the 2020s, whether a new system might enable people to interact better with the council or get their data better. But we shall see, I guess. But watch this space. I hate to be cynical, but I wouldn't be surprised if any new computer system that's being introduced by an organisation that screwed up the last one, or arguably did, and then responded so badly to criticism, we may see history repeating itself. I hope not, but I thought I'd mention it, and that's the end of that. I'll just see if we've got any more comments. Anyone want to say anything about that? Sorry.
It just made me the Databorn was I don't know much about Hackney one, but I know like because the NHS got hit by the WannaCry one. Yeah, well, I don't know how long it was ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and I always thought it was harsh that they got such a big penalty from the ICO, but it was because they didn't take basic steps to update their system. So I think if it was a bet between the ICO being right and Hackney being right, I would definitely put money on the ICO being right here. That just councils, I don't know, they often don't have any data specialists like in their team anyway. So I think I don't know. I just think they're probably just being very ham-fisted about this, and they're probably very much in the wrong and don't even realise it and have insight into it.
Yeah, and Hackney's Cheeseface has pointed out that he used to be a Hackney resident and left just before this happened. And comments is, sorry, is there anything that's not corrupt? Post office, housing, police, to name a few. It's quite scary. Yeah, I mean, I personally think my reaction to the post office inquiry confirms my view that I think we should have a default position in looking at any public organisation or even private, is that it will be corrupt because it involves human beings, and human beings are corrupt. I'm just reading a book at the moment about the Birmingham. I'm listening to an audio book. I'm cheating. I'm not reading it, but it's about the Birmingham Six. And anyone who has any doubts about the fact that the police can be completely corrupt, and I don't mean that in the sense of backhanders. I mean in the sense of large numbers of police officers concocting false accounts of what they did, having behaved in an incredibly violent and nightmarish way towards innocent people who were wrongly accused of crimes. I asked somebody the other day, as a criminal solicitor at the moment, whether they think the police have sort of got their act back together since the early mid 70s. And inevitably they have, but I think you'll always find that there's going to be corruption. And it's true of lawyers. I mean, I mean, I won't speak out of turn now, but I mean, there's plenty of corruption in the way that if you ask the legal aid agency, they'll tell you about all the false, corrupt claims that have been made for payment by solicitors, and yeah, we're all. There's so much temptation there because if you want, and once you start doing it, and you get away with it, you with any corruption, you think it's going to go on forever, but it doesn't. So yeah, Cheeseface, I think that it's hard to think. Can anyone think of any institution that isn't corrupt? That we could
I
say
think
no,
there's
they
quite a few
wouldn't be corrupt.
psychologists who would say that it's just part and parcel of it. There's a famous guy called Dan Ariely who did a lot of research on this, and it later found out that he'd actually faked some of his own experiments. So he's kind of been discredited since. But there's Philip Zimbardo who did the Stanford prison experiment, did the same sort of thing with just the whole US military in the Middle East, and basically said it's not just a few bad apples, it's the system that kind of creates opportunities for lots and lots of people to basically act unlawfully a little bit, rather than just one or two people kind of doing it a lot.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's, I mean, the system, and also I just think it's human nature to be corrupt, really, or corruptible. I mean, there are people out there that lead exemplary lives, and far be it from me to say that they must be corrupt. It's just they haven't been caught yet. But the system I mean, every system puts things in people's way. I remember seeing a thing on television about some American police officers who busted some people with in their car with a bootload of cocaine, and they worked out that the value of that cocaine was sort of the equivalent of 3 times the entire wages of those 2 police officers for the whole of their career. And you think, well, how many people can resist that? So all they had to do was turn a blind eye, let the people go, and keep one of the bags themselves, or you know what I mean, take a backhander. It's difficult to blame people. And so we got Children's Services conspired against the homeless single mum with the housing team recently to double downing on gatekeeping. I mean, I'm not sure of the specific story you're talking about there, Ginger, but I'm aware of social workers not telling the truth in terms of justifying decisions and cutting corners on care proceedings and so forth, and obviously the mistreatment of children in the care system, which is a form of corruption in the sense of people not doing their jobs properly and covering up. And of course, before I go on, sorry, I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention the victims of Hillsborough who were insulted for years by a concerted conspiracy by police officers to lie about what happened at Hillsborough and who was responsible for it. So yeah, it's. I'm sorry, I sound a bit sanctimonious. I don't mean to, but yeah, there's corruption everywhere, I'm afraid. And hopefully it won't affect Hackney's new computer system, as where we got onto it, and I wish them all the best with it. So I think that's everything I had in mind to talk about today. Was there anything what we're going to try and talk about next week? In a similar vein to corruption, actually, the sort of corruption of the homelessness system and gatekeeping, because there's a local government ombudsman report we were just talking about when we weren't online, which has come out. Which council is it again?
Brentwood.
Brentwood. And what, in a nutshell, they've been caught gatekeeping on multiple occasions. Yeah.
I think they said out of 220 cases, like it was something like 10% of the cases actually were dealt with properly and got a proper decision at the end of it, which is worse than I've ever actually seen. I've seen plenty of councils break the law a lot, but yeah, Brentwood seems to be taking it to the next level.
So I'm going to do my homework between now and next week, if not by. Well, the thing is, Thursday. We were just saying the Thursday sessions tend to be primarily responding to much more questions than Mike's channel gets. So if we don't get time to talk about it, then I'll definitely try and read the stuff. So next Monday we can have a discussion about gatekeeping, without wishing to spoil the fun in advance. I would say, as you might guess from my last little rant, I think gatekeeping is part of the system. And there's gatekeeping with a capital G, which you might say, which is where people get told consciously by council staff, sort of, no, we can't help you, when they know they can, sort of, we go away, we're shut or something. And then there's gatekeeping with a small g, which is the whole traditional process of a homelessness application, where you've got to jump over 5 hurdles, which is you've got to be eligible, homeless, unintentionally in priority need, unintentionally homeless, and have a local connection. And traditionally, the housing officer would be looking for a way in which they could stop you getting housed by using one of those reasons, which to me is the form of gatekeeping, in the sense that if they're successful, the gate is closed. But that's not what is meant by gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is meant where you sort of go over the top and just act in a completely way outside the normal rules. So that's what I'll be looking at. I'll be thinking of, but I may be wrong about that. When we look at what Brentwood got into trouble for, I think that one of the last comments for today. The prison planet theory seems very plausible. Doesn't surprise me. Ginger G happens more than people think. Does anyone know what the prison planet theory is? Sounds interesting. Mike, you know a lot of this.
Yeah, I've just written it down.
I'm just googling. I've not heard of it before. I'm just having a little look now.
Yeah, yeah. I was watching another YouTuber who I've forgotten his name now. He's the one that debunks a lot of Christian or religious thinking. A young guy with a moustache.
Will O'Connell, is that his name? No,
Yes.
something like
Yes, I think so. But he was going through different theories about, and one of them was the theory that we are all just a figment of somebody else's imagination, which he put it very well. And I thought philosophically he could be right there. But anyway, we won't go that far with the analysis of gatekeeping. So thank you, Mike and Kareth, and if you're out there, Shannon, sorry we didn't see you, and look forward to seeing you on Thursday, hopefully. But unless anyone wants to mention anything, else
No,
I'll
just
end.
sorry for my connection issues earlier. Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's good that you overcame them, and we get some good audio from you later on. And so I will end the show if I can press the right button. I think it's this one. So see everybody on Thursday.